let's talk for a moment before it's official.
Okay. I was born in Dobbsbury Hospital, but my parents lived in Hastings on the Zinsser Estate. My father was like a maintenance. And
Excuse me for a moment, Eleanor. We're going to start this in a formal way. And the formal way is I'm going to say first my name, the date, everything, and then you
Okay.
are. So I'm Louisa Scioscia Stephens. This is October 25th, 2005. Oh, no, my mistake. October 26th, 2005. We're in the Draper House in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York, and I'm interviewing Eleanor. Oh, I forgot to say my age. My age is 58. And here's Eleanor. You can say the same things.
my name is Eleanor McGinigle. It's really Eleanor Iafrate McGinigle. Should I say we're here?
Yeah, sure.
We're here at the Draper Cottage in Hastings-on-Hudson. I was born in Dobbsbury Hospital, but my parents lived here in Hastings on the Zinsser Estate. My father worked for the Zinzers. And also the Albert Ritz family lived. He was the chauffeur. And when I was coming home from the hospital, Mrs. Zinsser came with my father and bought my first layette. And we lived there for a few more years, and then my father went out to work as a bricklayer, which he was really a bricklayer. And I have a brother and a sister, which are now deceased. My sister Edith, and she married a D'Souza, which she has a lot of children and grandchildren here in Hastings. And my brother, he married Ann Zaremba. She was also a local girl born here in Hastings. And she had two children, a boy and a girl. And the son is living in Florida, and the daughter lives in Massachusetts.
And when were you born?
I was born October 13, 1920.
And what did your father do on the estate?
He was more like a maintenance man. And I think there's one thing that I should tell you that I don't think too many people know, because the ones who do know, they're not here anymore, that Mr. Zinsser was the Santa Claus of Hastings. He had a box in the post office. And at Christmas time, he used to have and this is going back in the 20s and into the 30s. And if you wrote a letter to Santa Claus, and you had to put your name and your address and your age, and you'd put it in the post office, a box they had in the post office, and then he would get the letters, make a list, and my father and Mr. Ritz with the chauffeur, they used to go down to the city and buy all the toys, and he gave those toys out.
That's an incredible story. I never heard that before. Well, how come he has so much money?
Well, he owned the Zinsser factory. He made different dyes, which now this factory's not there anymore. But he was down on the waterfront.
And was there a mansion there where the Zinsser Field is now?
Yes, there was a mansion in the middle of where the ball field is, and every once in a while I could picture it, because my father when I was young, he used to bring me up to visit Mrs., because she just always wanted to know how I was and how I was doing. And, and then now you go to the ball field, and it's just a field, and I look for that. I'm surprised they even took that. They should have kept it as a historical. Really. I know they needed a ball field, but I still think that would have been nice.
So the estate included what's now the ball field, and also the Zinsser Gardens, right? Anything else?
And then on the other side of the aqueduct, there's still a house there that's, I think, still part of the Zinsser. That was part of I don't know if it still is today. After the Zinzers more or less disappeared, because they had two daughters, and one was related, or she married into the Lawford, something to do with the Lawford family, and the Kennedys were involved.
And you went to school then in Hastings?
I went to school in Hastings. I went from kindergarten up. I graduated in 1939.
What was it like?
Oh, I loved it. I think sometimes I say the best 4 years I spent in the high school. I was very active in all the sports. I was a cheerleader. And I just enjoyed it. And we we made some great friends, and we're still friends today. But we lost a lot of the young men that went off to war right after they graduated, and they were killed in the war.
Do you remember any cheers?
Oh, well, yeah. Right off band, I can't. We was so. I can't remember the cheers really right off. Just rah rah for so. Every time a fella came out or went in, we said, "Let's give 3 cheers for HASTINGS, yay team!" But it was a lot of fun traveling. At the time when I was in school, we had 2 gym teachers. One was for the girls, and one was and it was Leroy Cochran was for the boys. He taught the gym classes, the basketball team, the football team. He did calisthenics, and he never had a child do anything that he wouldn't do. He was in shorts in the gym, and he would show them what to do, and they would do it. And we had one gym was Miss Scheifel, and then she got married. She was Mrs. Schmidt. And she had the girls. We had honor basketball. We had regular basketball, intramural class things. And we had archery. We had hockey. And it was where we came out with championship. Now, Coach, I'm so glad they named the gym after him, because we were in the Hudson River League, which was like Doss Ferry, Irvington, Tarrytown, Peekskill, all the way up. And there was no parkways. And when we used to have to go to a game, we used to leave sometimes 6 o'clock for a game that was going to be played at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock, because you couldn't go on the parkway. We didn't even have the parkways at that time. But he had championship teams all the time.
Why do you think it was? Was it because he demonstrated everything?
Yes, I think so. And it was all teamwork, It wasn't that this fellow was the star, even though we did have some that were really terrific. But it was really the teamwork, and that's what he wanted. And he was very strict with going to bed early. He lived in Pinecrest, and he had a dog. And at 9:30 at night, he used to walk down through the village with the dog. And if he saw you stand, he wouldn't say nothing to you. But the next day at school, he'd say, "You're not playing this Friday night at the game." And they'd say, well, he says, "I saw you standing on the corner," or whatever. And the kid couldn't say, "It wasn't me."
So it was a good time in
It was
Hastings
a
High School.
good time. We grew up. I think that was growing up then was, even though it was Depression time, but people were very close. Your neighbors, regardless what ethnic background, you all got along. There was no such thing as racist. And half the time, we kids, we just liked somebody because they were just a great kid. We didn't care if they were Russian, Polish, Jewish, Greek. We didn't care. We never asked, and we didn't care what church they went to. We were just friends, and you had neighbors that you never had to get a babysitter. If a mother had to go to the village for something, if you lived on the other side of the bridge, like Warburton Avenue south, well, you didn't get a babysitter. You're going to run for a few minutes over to the village. Well, your neighbor took care of the kid. If you're not going to be home when the kid come home from school, she would say, "Your mother's not home, so go change your clothes." And then you went in there and she gave you something to eat, And it wasn't, fast food or anything. It was everything was homemade, But most mothers didn't work. They were home anyway. So when you walked in the door, and if your mother wasn't standing there, you said, "Ma, where are you?" Whatever. But it was, and everybody was close. You didn't have to lock your doors. We never did, because you trust, everybody trusts one another.
It sounds like a good life. What changed?
I think, well, then people, see, and everybody had about the same thing. There was Depression time. And, we had my father and mother they had a mom and pop store for a while. And
Excuse me, Eleanor, where was that?
That was on 17 Washington Avenue. And that was the hill, and the Anaconda they had the bridge at that time that brought you over to the factory. And so my brother and I and my sister, we had more than some of the other people, because they thought we were rich because we had a store. But forget about that. People used to charge and then never pay, but that was, You felt sorry for people. But like we had a bicycle, and my father said, if you're bringing that out, you have to share. Well, by the time everybody took a ride, it was for me to go inside and have dinner, and the same thing, you always had to share. And this is what they taught you, and there was a lot of respect. When a neighbor called you and said, would you go to the store for me? And your parents told you, you do what they say. And you always respect it because you figured, oh, if she ever tells my mother, they'll punish me. So you always had respect for your neighbor and your teachers. My father said when we were in school, the teacher was the boss. And he didn't want to hear anything, no complaints. You do as she says.
Were they good teachers?
Oh, they had great teachers. I had Miss Davy, I had Miss Pingree, I had Miss Van Ostrin, Gladys Smith. I can remember Mr. Hopkins was the superintendent at the school at the time, and we were in seniors. We had Mr. Myers was our principal, and I'll never forget our dean, Elizabeth Smith. And Mrs. Burley, she was my history teacher in high school, and Sarah Jones, and then, and it belonged. I was a Catholic, and then I changed when my son was born. I became a Protestant because my husband was a Mason, the Masonic thing, and I joined the church. And there's my teachers, Miss Smith and Miss Davy, and Miss Delanoy. She was a secretary to the superintendent of schools. So it was just like one big family. I said, I left the school, and here I am. Now I'm in church with the same people. And they didn't treat you as a student. You were on the same level as them. There was no, you call them by their first name. First I used to say, Mr. She says, they all called her Davy, or some called her Mildred. So we called her Davy. And then, of course, then she would need something. She'd call me up, Eleanor, now I want you to, she volunteered for something. So then she call me, but I didn't mind it. They were a great bunch. He had a lot of respect for them, and they treated you well. Quiet in school. And we had classes between 30 to 40 kids in a class, and one teacher, no aide. Even the kindergarten. Oh, Mrs. Reiser, she had all these little children, and she was wiping their nose, wiping their rear when they went to the bathroom. Wintertime, putting on their boots. She did all that. She was like a grandmother. And the kids loved her. That's when you could hug a child. Today you can't do that. You just say, oh, what a good girl you are, and you hug them. If the kid cried, you just took her aside. But you can't do that today.
If those teachers came back, what do you think they would say to present teachers? What advice would they give present teachers?
What advice I would give to the present teacher?
Or you or your old teachers?
Well, things have changed, because I even spoke to Miss Davy one time. We were talking about salaries. And I said, what a change from when you were a teacher. And she said, and how? She said, we had big classes, we just taught. And our salary, she said, it's when you compare today's salary. Now I'm going back, maybe 10 years, 15 years. There's a big change in the salaries from what the teachers were getting today, and what she got, what any of the teachers got. It were low, but they were dedicated teachers. They were in school. There was Miss Barton. I can remember she was a math teacher. And quite a few of the teachers, like after school, I had activities in school. So we'd be either down the gym or one of the club meetings. And then, we'd go to our locker, and you'd pass a classroom. There's a teacher in there. She's in there. She's doing either correcting papers, or she was doing the next day's lessons. And if you wanted to see a teacher, you just go up and say, can I see you after school? If your son had a problem they wanted to. Or and the teacher would say, if you need help, you come after school. They didn't wait for you. Like today, the teacher, if you need help, you have to ask for it. If the teacher knows that you weren't getting the lesson, she would say, why don't you stop after school and I'll help you. So it's a whole different ball game today. And I don't think at that time the teachers had a union, but today there's a union. So it's all different. It's like everything else. You know, they say, when I'm say, well, in my day, and they say, there goes Eleanor Roosevelt again, my day. And I said, well, we had a good day, but my children are very interested in that, And my nieces, they said, I have one niece that used to say, gee, Aunt Eleanor, you had such a great time in school. You know, all the things you did, even growing up. She said, things are so different nowadays. Of course, you see, we didn't have drug problems. We didn't have drinking problems. We used to sit, by 9 o'clock, we were off the streets. We had a 9 o'clock whistle. You know, the tower down the Anaconda, that big tower, that whistle used to blow. They used to blow it in the mornings, 5 to 8 o'clock, because the shop started at 8 o'clock. And it blew like 4:30 when the shop was, or, when people were ready to go home at 4:30. And it used to blow at 9 o'clock. Well, everybody was off the streets. There was no kids roaming the streets. If you went to the library, it closed at 9. So if you said to your mother, I was going to the library, you had to be home 9 o'clock. So you were home before the whistle blew. You figured, oh, gee, it's 9 o'clock, I got to get home. And that was it. Your parents didn't have to go look for you.
So that whistle, why did they blow it at 9 o'clock?
I don't know. I don't know if it was a test time, but they used it. But everybody used that as time to go home, And now I know you talk to, when we talk about old times, sometimes there's a group and say, my mother would say, as soon as the street lights come on, you come home because it's getting dark. Everybody had, some said the whistle. And of course, the only time we went out when we come home after our dinner, you had to go to the library because of something you had to look up, or if there was a basketball game or something at the school. But you didn't go out just to hang around. And you didn't get on the phone and hang on because everybody didn't have a telephone at that time,
You mean every household didn't have one?
No, because I remember in our house, we had a phone, and the other neighbors didn't. So somebody would call, and I'd have to say, just a minute, and I'd say, oh, you got a phone call, whatever. But some people didn't have it, and, So, and we went by radio. We sat and we listened to the radio.
What programs?
There used to be Amos and Andy, the Goldbergs. There was Bing Crosby. And then they had the theater. I forgot the name. There were 2 shows. And you sat and you listened to the plays. That's where you used your imagination and you pictured everything. You didn't have to, like today, you look at TV and everything's right in front of you, where you had your own imagination. And so many times, I had one girlfriend, she loved Bing Crosby. She loved him. So she said, oh, I got to get home. She said, he's going to be on at 9 o'clock, and I have to be home to listen to him. And this is when we're like 16 and 17. And as I was saying, we would sit around like it, where I lived in Washington Avenue, there's a driveway, and there was a wall. And we used to sit there in the evening. They used to, now we're 16, 17, 18, and some are 19, boys and girls. And we're sitting there. And remember, money wasn't that, because this was during the Depression time. And the boys used to go caddying. They used to get 25 cents a loop.
What does caddying mean?
Golf, at the golf course.
Oh.
They went to caddy. And they walked to Sprain or to Andrews. And everybody didn't have a bike. Everybody didn't have a car. So sometimes there was the Viday Bakery that was over on Warburton Avenue across the street, where I think now Grabowski has an office there now. Then next is Schnibby's gas station. There's a store there. It used to be Viday's Bakery. And we used to say, how much money you got? So one had a dime, one had a nickel, we get all that money together. And 2 of them or 3 people would walk up to Viday's. Then they would take the hot strudel out or something hot. And that was it. And then we'd buy what's one worth we had, and he used to give it to us. And this is our big thing. We didn't hang out. Of course, people didn't go into bars like they do today,
So this was the late 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
And the boys weren't away at the war yet.
No, this is This was even before I graduated. This was 30 up until 39. This is like say from 35 to 1939, where we hung around together. We were close together. We were teenagers, but and we traveled in like a group. If there was a school dance, we went to the school dance. You really weren't going with this fellow, but you liked him. But we went. Maybe there were 8 of us, 4 girls and 4 boys. We all went together. We went and we walked to the high school. The only time I remember when we were going to a formal up at the school, a dance, but we wore long dresses, was a formal dance. Then my brother was allowed to take the family car to pick the girl up because she had a long dress on.
So did you go to that formal?
Yes, I did.
And the formals, did you have a specific date, a formal date?
Yes, we would. But that's how you were, but everybody just stuck together. Even going to school. We used to go up to, we walked up Washington Avenue in the middle of the road, because there weren't that many cars around that day. And there'd be from kindergarten kids till senior high schools. We're all together, brothers and sisters and neighbors and whatnot. And everyone looked out for one another. So you didn't have to worry. Like today, you wouldn't dare send a child walk by itself to school.
Did your children go to school here?
My children went to school here. I have a boy and a girl. And my son's not married, but my daughter's married. And her husband went to school here. He was born and raised in Hastings-on-Hudson. So we go back.
Does your daughter have children?
She has 2 children, 2 boys, and they're both married. One lives in Virginia Beach and one lives in Atlanta, Georgia.
So you have older grandchildren.
Yes, I have not old. Yeah, I have 2 old. One is the Frank is 35 and the other one is 30. He just got married last November. He'll be a year married this coming year. And Frank has 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. So I have great-grandchildren.
Fabulous. Congratulations. I wanted to ask about the shop. You said that at 5 of 8, the shop opened. So that's Anaconda. Do you know anything much about that?
Well, I worked in the Anaconda during the war. And my brother worked there in the lab and the cable test. And I got a job, and it was just kiddingly, Mr. O'Neill, he was the personnel director, and they had an office where one of the bookstores is down there. Just before the bridge, he used to have an office there, and he used to stand outside with things for you to fill out, a form for a job. People just come look for a job, and he gives it. You can go inside and fill it out or take it home. And I worked in Irvington at the time for a book concern, and I was running down for a train, and he knew me, and he'd say hi, and I says hi. And so one day I said, "Oh, you got one for me?" He said, "Sure." And I took one, back, and he said to me the next day, "Did you fill that out?" I said, "No." He says, "Fill it out." So I filled it out, and I got a job. He hired me, and I went to the lab, to cable test in the lab. And I worked, with the Navy inspectors. We did, we worked on radar wire, and we call it baloney wire, but it was for detecting mines. It was big, fat cable, so they used to call it baloney cable. And we had a union, which was formed while I was there, and I worked on that, and I became the secretary to the union. And met a lot of nice people, and we saw a lot of them leave their job and go off to the war. And some came back and some didn't. That's heartbreaking. It's just like when I look through my yearbook, when all these fellows graduated in 1939, conscription time, they went. Some never came back. So it's heartbreaking when you look at that.
It is heartbreaking.
It is.
Anything else you'd like to talk about the war?
No, I don't think so, because it's so depressing when I think, because it changed a lot of things. Well, a lot of the women went to work which would never, they would never work before, and they knew that they were just taking place of somebody that went off to war. They were taking this person's place, because when they came back, they had to give up their job for the young men that came back. But while we were when I worked there, they formed a newspaper. They call it Molly Pitcher, and it was like a newspaper, and we used to mail it. So we picked names, 5, 10, or how many names you wanted, fellas that were in the service. And this had news, who went where, because what went on in the shop, who had a baby, who got married, who was sent overseas. And then then we mail it to these fellas, no matter where they were. Well, a lot of them were AOP numbers, But they liked it because they didn't know that somebody was almost in the same theater that they were in. And they were able to contact them. And they knew what was going on. And then when they'd come home, now there was a couple of fellas I didn't know that worked in the plant, because the plant was big, there was North Mill and South Mill, and I was more in the South Mill. And once in a while I'd go up to the North Mill to get something for a test. And so then I would send this to these names that I just pulled. Some of them I didn't know. So when they'd come, like they were on leave, they'd come home, and they would come down to the recreation room, and they would ask if they could see so-and-so. So I met 2 or 3 of the fellas that they said, I never met you, and I want to thank you for sending, putting me on your list, So it was, it was very nice. We did a lot of good things. We did a lot of Navy and Army work, and we got, they call it the Navy E. And it was being award. This was an award that the government gave out for all the work we put out and how 100% proof that we were. And we had a big celebration, and we had Navy people coming in. And so we met a lot of nice people. The Army came in, the Navy came in.
They came in because 100% proof has something to do with the copper cables?
How successful. Now, because I worked with the 2 Navy inspectors, and with this cable, and I had to work on a piece of paper and everything, because we used to cut it open, and we had to test it for tensile strength and for vapor, for water, and we had different tests to do, and everything had to be, any piece of scrap had to go into this paper, and they folded it up and they took it with them, and they just gave that. And I said, what kind of cable? I had to fill out a report, and he said, just give it he gave me a number. He said, this is cable number such and such. And we later found out it was radar cable we were working on. So it was just developing, and they had test this, and they wanted to make sure that it would do what they thought it would do.
So radar was just developing in the early 40s?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Also, who is Molly Pitcher?
She was somebody that I don't know if it was during the Civil War or one of the wars, and she used to go around giving when they were on the battlefield, and she would help them who wanted water. They call her Molly Pitcher.
And I also am very interested in the Union. My bookstore's in the Union building there. Mm-hmm. Were you involved in starting the Union there?
I was with them when they started it. The CIO, they call it at the time. And in fact, I was just telling Muriel that I up in the attic someplace, I have some pictures of when we started that and the affairs that we had, And it was interesting because we dealt with the company, the officials, the president of the union, of the company, and the general manager and all. And it was really like a lesson, you learn. And you really do, because before it was the union they had was a shop union, so that you didn't have any say. It was what the company said, and say you were looking for a promotion, but the company figured I'd rather give it to you than to her, even though she has more seniority than you. But that's why, because then your unions were starting all over at that time anyway.
What does CIO stand for?
This is a Congress of Independent Organizations or something. I can't remember it so far back.
And was there any resistance on the part of the...
Well, for a while there it was, but then, everybody that was coming into work, and they figured, well, some of them on the machines were only getting like 39 cents an hour, where they end up getting like $2.50 and $3. And then there was... incentive, they call it the incentive program, the more cable was, well, it was in different departments. There was the wire strands and how many feet of wire you did in a certain time, you can take your time. So how much you did, you got like a bonus. So in each department, so everybody wasn't getting paid the same. It was all according to what job you had. That's how the rules from the union were. If you worked at this job, you got so much an hour. If you worked at this job, and these are the rules. And then, of course, we'd have meetings with the company, and they had to agree what they agreed or didn't agree. Well, we give you this if you take this away, or, we'll do this and this is how you had a deal.
And what actually happened at the Anaconda Copper Factory? Did boatloads of copper come in and it was transformed into wire?
Well, that was very interesting, but frightening too, was the rod mill. Sometimes they come in by, the rods would come in by either boat or by train, freight train. And the trucks came right into the Anaconda. And then they brought it to the rod mill with these hot ovens. And the men used to take it and swirl it and make it into this cable. It was fascinating but frightening because all that hot iron, you could see that red hot iron. It was something. And so then it went from one building, then it was shipped into another building, and it was on, according to what kind of wire they were going to make. There was the high strand, one other, and it would go to the different departments, and then they would pull it out from strand to strand and put it on what did I forget?
Those big wooden spools?
Yeah, and then they would come over to the test department. We had cages, and they would put, the different, and then you had to go down and test. We used to take a sample, say this was I would cut off a sample, and I would mark it what it was, put a tag on it, and then I'd bring it up, or if I took it from 2 or 3 other, and you brought it upstairs to the testing lab, and then you would dissect it, and you do what you ever had to do for the certain, because each cable was different, some they call it paper cable, some call it, I hated the telephone, it had tiny, tiny strands. And, you open this big cable, and there was all these strands, and you had to test it, and if one didn't work, when you went to test it, you put the clamps on, and and then you had to turn on the heat so that, and it wouldn't work, and you figure, I have to test each one individually. Every day we say, oh, telephone cable, but we had to do it,
So the cables that were made were for telephone or for radar or?
We had for everything. We had it for, now the baloney cable, we had a big, it looked like a swimming pool high up. And it was about this round. And
so that's about 6 inches in diameter?
Oh, yeah. And we called it the baloney cable. They had another name for it. We always said baloney cable. And we used to test it sometimes. If it failed a test, so they'd put it in the water. And then we would, sometimes the boys say, blow it. So we'd give it more than we should, because there's a leak in it somewhere. And they had to find out where that was. And by pulling a certain lever, we blow it, they tell us, they would find the hole. But this was cable that was put around on a ship. On a ship, and they would put it all along here. This is the ship, right? All along here. And when it was going along, if there was a mine underneath, it used to make the ship come up. You knew you were above a mine.
So you're saying that somehow a copper cable wound around the perimeter of a ship, detected a mine, and lifted the ship?
They would get that figure, and it would, so they knew.
I can't imagine how that works.
I don't know either, but see, we couldn't ask too many questions. This was Navy. Even though we got very friendly with some of them, we had, when everybody was going away, this fellow's going to the Army or the Navy, we're having a party. They came because they liked it good. We had one fellow, he played the piano great, We say, Jack, you're going to come to the party? Oh, sure, But when it came, we never discussed business,
Where were the parties?
Oh, we had it at the Hastings house used to be they were called the Farragut Inn at the time, but now it's and that was when any of the boys came home on leave. They came up by train. The first stop was in the well, we say the Hastings house now. It was the Farragut Inn, and that was the first stop they would, because they say, "Who's home?" And the bartender would say, "Well, so and so came in, and so's here." So that was where you had to find out who was home that weekend, because some of the guys only could see themselves when they came in, from a different ship or from the army, if they were in Fort Dix, or they were around here somewhere. So they were able to come home, or some were just maybe would hitch a ride. Can you imagine they even hitched a ride, like from the Carolinas to come home for a couple of days? It's just to, because they know they were going to go overseas.
So it was their last chance to see their friends and family.
But that was the meeting place, at the we call it the Farragut Inn, and then we would say, "Oh, we have to go. Let's see," and we did. We'd go, maybe a bunch of us would go to the movies, and on the way out, we'd stop there to get something to eat, maybe a hamburger or something, and of course, the dining room was here, and there was just, you didn't know who was in the bar, but there was a serving where here was the dining room, and there was an opening here where the bartender would look to see who was there, and if you need a waiter,
So there was a window communicating between the bar and the
there was a door, but he would look through to see who was there, and we knew Charlie Andy. He was so good. So if he was very busy at the bar, and he would say, "What do you girls want?" We said, "We want a hamburger." "Go in the kitchen and make it," and we would go in and make our own. But he would say, "So and so's in here tonight," So then and he would tell the fellow at the bar, "Mary's there, Eleanor's there," or whoever, and he'd come in. It was so good to see. That was really a meeting place.
What was the bartender's name?
He was the owner. It was Charlie Anderson.
And there was a piano there in the Farragut Inn?
There was downstairs. First, it was a bowling alley downstairs, because before it used to be Farragut Inn originally. Then Falcaro Brothers bought it. They bought the business, not the building, the business. And they had bowling alleys set up downstairs. I think it was four alleys, because they were real bowlers, world champion bowlers. So they did this. They had the bar upstairs in the dining room, and they had the thing. So then they sold it to Charlie Anderson, and nobody used the alleys downstairs. So we got very friendly with Charlie, and he used to watch us like a hawk. If some guys come over to us, we're sitting, and he would open that, and he'd look, and he'd say, like this, and we go like this, and he would say to the fella, "Out."
So he
watched us. He watched us. He didn't want no trouble, no nothing. So we said to him one time, "Hey, Charlie, how about is the bowling alley still down?" He said, "Yeah." Well, I said, "How come?" He said, "If you want to play, go down." Well, we went down there one time. Oh, it was so dusty, so dirty. We cleaned it. And, of course, it wasn't automatic like they have today. We had to set up pins. But we had a ball, and he let us do it. He didn't even charge us. We had a ball down there. And then they changed it, and they made it like a rathskeller, down there, piano. It had a piano and entertainment. And so till this day, there's still that room downstairs in the Hastings house.
I never heard the term rathskeller.
Oh, really? I think it's an old German thing. They call it a rathskeller. And that's popular from the war. And when they were over in Germany and whatnot, I guess that's where it came from. They said they call it the rathskeller.
And what was the name of the bowlers?
Oh, let's say there was Johnny Frankovich, and there'd be, we call him, his name was Walter, we called him Battler. Everybody had a nickname. Most of the fellows all had nicknames. And Leo Lapata, and then he went into then they all went into the service. Then ended up, there was just girls. There was like Mary Olovich, Helen Ray Kotz, Mary Perry, Ann Ifred. Ann Zaremba, she finally married my brother, but we were single. And then we ended up, because the boys were all going into the service, and, and it was just girls going out, the old fellas.
So it was a completely different kind of life.
Yeah.
Did you have a nickname?
No.
And what did the girls do besides bowl?
Well, we all worked. We all went to work, because this is wartime. We saw everybody had a job. Some worked in offices, some worked in the city. So we would get together, but we didn't go out every single night because, you had to get up the next day and go to work. So we sat home and relaxed, wash your hair, put it up in pin. I had natural wavy hair, but, the girls had to wash their hair and put them in pin, set their hair for the next day. They had to go to work, so you washed out your stockings, and hung them in the bathroom, and your brother would go like this.
So was your brother younger than you?
No, he was older, 3.5 years older than I was.
And how did you meet your husband?
He worked in the... Well, I've known him because, he he was born in Scotland, but he came here when he was 12. But we got to know... when you live in Hastings, you get to know... you get to know everybody. And then he worked in the Anaconda, and he was on the committee with the union.
For the union.
And he
CIS.
he became the top man between the company and the union for both mills. The South, we call them both mills. There used to be North Mill and South was, where do you work? I work in the North Mill. I said, well, I work in the South Mill. All the big shots were in that building. People were so proud of what department what building they worked in. But that was all asbestos up there. That's where a lot of people... When you worked with asbestos, we had a cream we had to put on. We wore... the girls that worked at the machines had to wear a hat and wear your hair. Your hair couldn't be out. It was like a cap. It wasn't too bad. You didn't look too bad. And safety shoes. You had to have shoes with a plate, with the tip plate. And if you're handling, like, we had to wear gloves because when we took, some of the cables had metal on it, and when you'd go to cut it or you could snap it, it could scratch you. That was it. But if you were handling anything with asbestos, and we had a lot of cable that had asbestos around it, we had cream to put on your hands and on your face so you wouldn't get it. But a lot of people that worked up in the North Mill. We very seldom had too much to do with it because we were in the South Mill. North Mill had it. And they really had to be very careful because if that flew around too, it could irritate you, get itchy. And some of them did get some kind of a facial thing from it, and the company had to pay quite a bit for them.
So what were the mills exactly? What does a mill mean in regards to copper?
What do you mean? No, we said the South Mill. That was the name of the factory. Instead of saying the South Factory, the North Factory, the South Mill, the North Mill. So where do you work? I work up at the North Mill. I always worked in the South Mill. I just went up to the North Mill. Sometime we had to go up there get some reports or a piece of cable to do a test on it. They had their own testing lab up there, and we had our own down. But sometimes they were having a problem with the cable, so we would take it and do the test and see if it would come out the same or if somebody's making an error. So.
And let's see, tell me something else about very early life, when you were very little.
Well, let's see if I can go that far back. Well, I can remember just the family. Of course, I was young. You didn't go on it, but there was always company. All your aunts. And Sunday was a big day. And I can remember. I used to. I had 2 aunts that lived in the city, and I was so glad my mother was saying, Aunt Elizabeth's coming and Uncle Mike's coming up this Sunday. Oh, I couldn't wait for them because they would come up with this. This big box of all the pastries, Italian pastries. And they were the big ones, not like today you get the miniatures. And they came from Little Italy, in the Bronx. Oh, God. Then another family would come up. And we all sat around. Kids even, of course, you mind your manners. You didn't interrupt or do anything. But you went, and when we were invited, even when we were teenagers, and my brother would look at me and look, we're going there, and my mother says, we're invited, we're going to Jamaica on Sunday because we're invited. We didn't mind going there because there was a lot of kids, our age. He was 16, my brother was 19. Even though he was 19, he had to come with family. Family stuck together. It's not like today. The kid go one way, that people don't even, a lot of them don't even have a family dinner on a Sunday today. But we did. You went to church, you came home, you had dinner. Either you went to the summertime, you went to the ballpark. Everybody went to Reynoldsfield to see a to see a ball game. And then either you went to the movies, or I used to bring 3 or 4 people home with me on Sunday. My mother would give us supper, or I'd go to Mary's house, and her mother would. There was always plenty of food in the house. My mother used to cook, and my father would say, "Oh, the Army's coming tonight for dinner," because she always cooked extra,
So this was even though it was the Depression.
Mm-hmm. Right? You just, of course, when you think butter was like 10 cents a pound, and everything was so cheap, but you cooked, like you make somebody, like a neighbor was sick, your mother made a pot of soup and brought it next door because she was sick, or you made, or like a big stew. It was a one-pot meal, which to this day, that's what I like. I like the one big pot, like a pot roast and all that.
So what else did your mother cook?
Well, everything was homemade, like even her macaroni, her raviolis. We were having soup. She would get that out, and she makes little egg noodles to throw in the soup. And she, made lasagna, everything. And her own sauce. And sometimes in the summer, when she had a lot of tomatoes, we had a little garden in the back. And she would can her own tomatoes, and then we'd use that in the wintertime. But everything was homemade. She made bread. She made pizza.
What was your mother like?
My mother, she had such her heart was so big. If you came home, you said to, so-and-so's mother is sick, or so, right away she's cooking something, or she would go and buy some fruit and go visit them. If you said, so-and-so's having a baby, the next thing the knit needles came out, or the crochet, she crocheted and knit. And she always had a box of Hershey bars in the house. And if she went to visit somebody and there was a child in the family, she'd bring a bar, for this child. Or you buy the box of the animal crackers, that little thing. And I still do that for my great-grandchild. She loves that little box but they were 5 cents a box at the time. But, things were always open your heart, and she was always, and they had a group of women, there was about 6 or 7 of them, and it was Ladies' Day, the girls' day out. So one day they were at my mother's. They'd come in the afternoon, they'd have tea, and they'd just sit and talk or have coffee, a piece of cake. And next week they would go to Mrs. Pasanella's, and maybe the next week they'd go to Mrs. Lavasheli's. They were very friendly that way. And these are women that, they stayed home. They did all their cooking, their washing. Monday was wash day, and Tuesday was ironing day, and that was Mondays in the wintertime. That was soup day, because she'd make the soup and put it on the back, and then she got busy with doing her wash.
Was wash one of the more challenging household chores?
Well, it was, but then when the wash machines come out, we got one with the thing on the top, the wringer and all that. We had that, so it wasn't.
How old were you when you got a wringer machine?
Oh, I must have been maybe about 10 or 11.
So before that, she used what are those called?
The washboard.
Right.
And I would try to do it. I thought it was fun, When you're a kid, you want to wash dishes. Then when you have to do it, you better do I have to. And my mother, and I would say, "Ooh, that's rough on my knuckle." She said, "You don't scrub like this. You scrub this way."
You scrub with your knuckles up.
Yeah, you get the clothes in here and you do. You're not scrubbing your knuckles. You're washing the clothes. And then she show you how to ring. I used to ring it. She said, "Ring it this way."
And what was the technique for ringing?
Well, I would go and I would go. She says, "No, no." She says, "Do it this way." You know. And then if it was a lot of the stuff we did by hand, like your blouses, because then it was silk blouses and your stocking. You did it in Lux. That was soap. It was for that or Ivory Snow. And she said, you do this. If there's a little stain, you take it and you just rub it gently. Don't do it too hard, because right away you think, oh, I have to do this. No, no, and you do that. So till this day, when I go take a shower, she taught us this. When I take off the underpants and my stockings or socks, whatever at that time it was, you fill the hand basin with a little. We kept the Ivory Snow and Lux one under the cabinet in the bathroom. So that soaks while you take a shower, and when you go out of the shower, you get dressed. Then after, not get dressed, you put your robe on, a chenille robe or towel yourself dry. Then you rinse those things out, and you hang them on hangers.
So you wash your underclothes while you're washing yourself?
Because then you didn't have that much laundry to do. Like some of your blouses you had to do by hand. The rest of it was done. They used to throw it in the machine. But you see, most of us we all wore, when we went to school, it was dresses and skirts, ankle socks, stock. And the only time we went to school and you saw somebody little dressy and with stockings on, you'd say, "Where's your class going today?" You were going maybe to see to a museum, or you were going to the city. I belonged to the drama club. We were going to a matinee in the city. But then you had because even on Sundays you got dressed, even if you weren't going to do it, if you're going to even go to the ball games, you stayed dressed. You went to church dressed and you stayed dressed. We didn't wear slacks. They came in when we were in high school, I think, the snowsuits. You could wear a snowsuit to school, but you couldn't wear it in class. You took it off and put it in your locker, and you wore dress or a skirt.
So when you were dressed up, was the main difference stockings instead of bobby socks?
Well, yeah, we had stocking. There was silk stockings, and then just about when the war came, we got the nylons. But we wore one piece, slips, barbizon, which was quite this, and bras. And we always wore like a panty girdle so we wouldn't shake, even though you can be flat as a board. Our niece, if you put her behind a telephone pole, you couldn't find it because she was small. She wore a little panty. She says, "Well, I don't want my little behind to shake."
And this was your mother?
No, our niece. She was so thin, and till this day she still is. And she's the one didn't like whipped cream, didn't like any of that sweet stuff. And we thought, oh, no wonder why you're so thin. You could eat all that stuff and never gain an ounce. And no, she didn't care for it. But we'd eat it, and we'd say, how come I can't lose any weight? And in the meantime, you're eating.
So, did your grandmother live near you?
No, my grandmother, my parents came from Italy. And my of course we had a lot of pictures, that my father wrote back and forth. Because when my father came, my mother and father got married in Italy. My father came first. He had his first cousin that lived in the city. We called her Aunt Elizabeth. It was his first cousin. And so that's the time you had to come and quota, and you had to be sponsored. So she sponsored him. He came, and the first thing she said to him, "Frank, I registered you for night school." She said, "You're going to school to learn to read and write English because you're in America, and that's what you have to do. Even though you're an apprentice for a bricklayer." That's what he learned as a young kid over there. She says, "You got to learn to read and write." So in the meantime, he was going to night school, and he got any kind of job during the day as long as he could. And then he would save his money, and he would send it to my mother in Europe. And then I think like in 6 months she came here. In the meantime, he was very, and my aunt helped him, you know, with the schooling, and he passed, and then he got his citizen's papers. And do you know, we had people that came from the same part of Italy that he came. They're right outside of Rome, about 20. Well, when I went that time to visit from Rome, it was about 20 minutes. Not even a half hour. That's right outside. But people that came here, you know, they were married and their wives were there. They came here to work to make money. They'd send money there, or they go back, and they would. And then as things were changing, my father kept in touch with he had two sisters and a mother. His father died after he was here, maybe 5 years, and they would say, "Oh, we like to see," and they'd say, we took pictures. He took pictures of us and sent it, and they took pictures of themselves and sent it. So this is how we got to know the family. But all these friends would say, "Oh, you ought to come back. You ought to come back." Well, my father said, "Listen, this is my country now. This is where I made my bread and butter, and I raised my family." He said, "This is where I stay." So when they were 50 years married, they decided to go to Europe, to Italy. And off they go. And so my father addressed all envelopes for me if I wanted to write, you know, because I lived in the house.
Was this about 1965?
I know it was was it? Yeah, it was in around in the 60s. Yes. I'm trying to think. Yes, it had been around in the 60s. So I said to my father, okay. I said, now listen, they went in August. And I said, you know, Dad, if you want to stay and have maybe holidays with them, you know, because he owned the house and I lived upstairs. And I said, well, you know, we'll take care of everything. And if there's any problem, he gave me a phone number to call. And he gave me envelopes. He addressed his, you know, but I could send it if I wanted to write him a letter. He said, well, I don't know. We'll see when I get there, you know. So when he gets there, he said, when he got off the plane, he saw all these people that couldn't imagine what they were. They're all the nieces and nephews. Because, you know, during the war, when they were in war in Italy, you know, my mother was sending bundles over to Italy, you know. And she'd say to me, what do you got in the closet? Oh, she used to take half stuff. Whatever happened to that sweater? And she said, oh, I sent it to Europe. Well, anyway, she did a lot of that.
It was part of her big-heartedness, right?
Yeah, always. And then there was one, and I could remember, she said to me one day, I want to show you some pictures we got from the family. And there they are with the clothes. I said, oh, there's my dress. I wonder what. And anyway, but, you know, when the Germans went through, they had taken a lot of the families there, they took stuff and they buried it, you know, so that they couldn't find it. And, you know, and all the young girls there, they do a lot of sewing and, you know, they do. They're like us, we run to the store. They knit, they crochet, they make their own clothes. So this one girl was a niece of my father's that was going to get married. And she said all the stuff that she had planned, the Germans had taken, you know, and all. So my mother and I went to Yonkers to this store in Main Street. My mother used to go buy her all her her draperies, her curtains, her bedspreads and everything, and this woman knew her well, and she said, I need some satin. We bought tulle, we bought satin, we bought everything for this girl. You know, even the thread and everything, so she could make. Wow, this girl made her dress, and she sent a picture of the wedding of her, one by herself, one with her husband. You thought that she bought that dress. It was gorgeous. But see, my mother was that way. Oh, the poor people, you know, she felt so sorry for them and all. But she had a heart bigger than, you know, always. So you couldn't, like if her and I went shopping, like sometimes we go into the city, And we'd walk by his door. How you say, "Oh, isn't that nice? Oh, that looks nice." She says, "You want? Let's go inside. We'll get it." I says, "I don't want it, Mother." She even did that. You know, when when my children were small, my daughter often talks about it. She'd say, "Oh boy," he says, "Grandma was great. She would have my daughter for the day. Because she'd come home with new shoes, a new dress, or something. She says, 'Look what Grandma bought me.'" You know, and she still talks about that. And I said to her, you know, then when she had a baby, her first son, and they lived up in Beacon, New York at the time, and we used to go up almost every weekend to see this baby. And every time I went, I bought an outfit. If so, I didn't make it. I'm not that, you know, I can't. My sister was a good gourmet cook, and my mother was a great cook, and plus, you know, arts and crafts. That was her, right? Me, sports, and so she would say, "You know, Mother, every time you come, you don't have to bring a gift." I says, "Listen, I want to bring a gift. I want to bring a gift. I'll bring a gift, you know." So now she's a grandmother. And I say to her, "Janice, look all the stuff you're buying. Why are you bringing this? Remember when you used to say," and she, "I know, Mother, now I understand."
It takes that whole generation.
It does.
Right. So because your mother was so generous all during the war, then when they went there for the 50th anniversary, then they were met with everyone?
Yes, and it was good to see everybody. But, you know, then they were only, she'd be there, and, you know, they're talking, you know, and then all of a sudden my father was telling us, oh, they were talking, they were telling us different things, and it was good. You know, you saw pictures of them, but it's nice to see them, you know, young. And my mother's talking, they asked my mother something, and she's talking a blue streak, and everybody's just looking at her, and my father pokes her, and he said, "You better talk Italian because I don't understand a word you're saying." She automatically went into English, you know, and it's like just when I went to visit an uncle. When I took a tour to Europe, to Italy itself. I went all through. And when I was in Rome, I was there for 4 days, and I was going to go see him. And Sam Capuano he has a place that used to go every year. So he was there. So he used to go see my uncle when he used to go over, because I used to give him money. I said, "Give this to my uncle, you know, tell him," he used to write in Italian for me. I say, you know, "Tell him this, that, and the other." So when I was going to go, I says I was going to go visit him. So he brought me over, and so I went to night school in Dobbs Ferry for Italian to learn to speak Italian. I understood it if you didn't talk too fast. But you see, I went to night school, but then I had nobody when I come home to speak Italian to. My husband didn't understand. He was Scottish. And, you know, but anyway, I got to get the idea. So when I went to my uncle's, you know, after you're sitting there, you do. You know, some things came to you. But then if I threw an American word in, he understood it, because he has a daughter that's married and lives in England, and one lives in Switzerland. So he gets, you know, like anything else, you learn words. But he understood between my hands and talking, he understood. Because Sam came with me to bring me there. But then they had to go somewhere, so he left me with my uncle. And then my uncle says, looking at a beautiful place, and he looks out the window, and there's a beautiful, they call it a villa, you know. He said, "This villa is for sale. Why don't you buy it?" And I says, "What am I going to do with it?" "Well, you have some place to come all the time. You know, like Sam comes, he has a place over there." I said, "Oh, I don't think so. I don't know." You know, I figured I'd have to be a landlord, you know, just rent it, because I wouldn't go over every single year, you know. But then his wife wasn't very well at the time, and then she passed away, and then his son wrote, and said that the father had moved in with him because he couldn't stay by himself, you know. And then he finally passed away. So I never went back. I thought I would go back and spend more time going around and meeting all these cousins. You know, I just met when I went to see my uncle, his son came over with his wife and the little boy, but
I didn't. My uncle thought I would stay longer, and he even had a bedroom all ready for me to stay. And he said, "This is where your mother and father stayed when they came." But I said, "No, maybe next time." But I never got back. But so my daughter said she'd like to take a trip to. I says, "Well, then go look up all these cousins. You have first, second, third, and fourth cousins over there, you know." But it would change. My father said, because when these people go, they say, "Oh, they built a road, they did this, where was it just a country road at one time? Now they built up, they have a hotel and no." He saw all that. He liked that they modernized the village. There's the street lights and paved roads, and there's a lot of little stores and stuff.
Do you remember the name of that village?
Frosinone. Isla de Lira, that's where they came, Frosinone. But anyway, because even these people from Hastings here, the Italians, Capuano, said, if you're going to buy any jewelry, wait until you go to visit your uncle and go to a regular little jewelry store. You won't pay what you're paying in the city. But we went to Florence, and this is what our tour guide said. If you're going to buy any jewelry, wait till we get to Florence, because we'll bring you to and I never saw a place like that in my life. It was so huge. This section was all gold. This was all silver. This was pearls, and they sold it by weight. So I bought myself a gold chain and earrings, and I bought my daughter, and everything was, and I got my daughter the same kind of chain that I got, and yet the weight was different, the price, and you wonder how come. He said we could do it by weight. But there was all kinds of gems, and it was so much cheaper than if you went right in Rome itself. There's Gucci, there was, he said, wait until you go to Florence and you buy. If you're buying good jewelry, if you want to buy the cosmetic things, go ahead, here. But if you want to buy good gold and silver or pearls or a gem, wait, and that is it. Because also with paintings, some of the paintings were out of this world, But in Venice, they had shoes. This one couple from Pennsylvania. We were walking in Venice, and it seemed so strange. You're walking the sidewalk, and here's water. And then here's store, and the store levels. You had to go down 3 stairs to go into a store, because the rest were people lived above. And there were some shoes, men's shoes, and he said, gee, they look good. She said, well, we'll go in and see. Well, he could buy 2 pairs, and these are good leather shoes. He said, I could only get, if I was buying them in the United States, I could only buy 1 pair.
So it was half as much.
Like they always say that when you're in that country and they make it there, it's cheaper. When I went to Bermuda, I was buying bone china. I collect bone china cups and saucers. And when I was on the ship, one person said they had been there before when going to Bermuda. She said, when you get to Bermuda, I was telling her I want to get some bone china. She said, when you get off the ship, to make a right, go all the way down to the end, you'll see it looks like a big warehouse. And they have everything. They have china, they have bone china, regular china, and you'll be surprised how many people go in there and buy their daughters their china, their silver. So when I was looking at, there was a cup I saw at Macy's with violets on it. It was $45. And when I was there, I saw, oh, can I see? So there was a lot of them. I said, I want that one, I want to see that and that. And I said, how much is it? She said, $3.85. And I said, now is this English money or? She said, $3.85. So I took the cup and I turned it over. And she said, it's bone china. I said, I saw this same cup for $45. She says, in New York, it's imported.
We're almost out of time, but could you tell me a little bit about when your mother came to America? Did she also sign up for night classes?
Yes, she did. That was just automatic to do that. So, but I have no regrets. I had a good life. I had good friends, and Hastings was great. I think Hastings is a great place. I mean, I've traveled. I lived in Florida for about 6-7 months, and we came back, and there's nothing like Hastings. I love to travel
Tell me one or two things that you most like about Hastings.
Well, I like the village part. You know, everybody together, and you have these nice little shops. You can, you know, you don't have to drive 18 miles to go to the store. And how friendly even the store managers or the help in the store. But today, in 2005, Hastings has changed quite a bit. And this is one thing that we at the senior center, we talk about, how much it's changed. You know, you walk the streets and you don't know anybody today. And, you know, before you walk in the village, you saw somebody, hi, how are you, hi, hi. Now you go into the emporium, and sometimes I feel as if I'm in another town because I don't recognize anybody, not even the help. They're not local, because when we had the A&P years ago, the Hastings High School kids were working. See, now we have all out-of-town kids. And if there are Hastings kids, I don't know, because they don't look familiar. And that's why Hastings, I think, has changed. And I wish they wouldn't, you know, I'm waiting for this waterfront for them, you know, for years and years, and I don't think I'll be here when they finally have it. And I hope they don't take every patch of land and start building big buildings. Now, I think what they want to build on West Main Street is horrendous, and it shouldn't be. You know, he wants to build on West Main Street going down to the train, you know, the parking lot back there. Did you ever see that monstrosity he wants to build? When you go down West Main Street, there's 1, 2, 3 houses and like a little apartment house there. He wants to take, and there's a big parking area there. He wants to take that house and build this monstrosity. That, where Warburton Avenue, you know, where the pizza place is and the apartments up there. Well, if he builds it, they can't. It blocks even their view. Because even Quinn is up there, been fighting that. And I think that's terrible. It's the building he wants to build should be on a land where there's plenty of space. You don't want to crowd that in with, you know, even these people that live there. They said when they look out their window, they're going to just see that monstrosity. And I wish they would, you know, stop this now. Whatever's going to be built on Main Street, I mean, I'm glad they're going to have a new youth center, because we really need one, because that building was really old and well used, you know, so it just wore out. We need a new one, where some people think,